Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name is Glenn Keller, and in this video we are diving into a more advanced quote-unquote workflow that gives us a little bit more interactivity. We are going to be performing all the steps of the workflow, so please note that any one step is a step that you would see. This video is definitely more for advanced users that need to understand the full concept of a workflow. So if you are watching it, the first couple of videos go through those concepts more attuned to an individual. So to begin with, though, we have been using this bolt for assembly as our released object, and we were able to get an approval for that in the last go. We can see the release status on it. So in this one, we're going to say that maybe something wasn't right with that. Maybe I needed an attribute change, something wasn't right with the attachments, and I need to submit it back for review. In this company, we have a custom workflow that is designed for the bolts. It goes through an initiate workflow step, and then a review, and then an engineering review. So we're going to submit it to that, but we don't want to submit the same one because that one has been locked down. So we're going to revise this object real quick, create a second revision of it that's not locked down, and then we're going to make our edits to it and then submit it to the workflow and interact. So in this case, a revise is essentially creating another iteration of the same part or document or change. Something has changed about it that doesn't redefine its form, fit, or function, and that could be an attribute change, that could be something along those lines. Whatever be the case, I'm going to come up to the far right and say New, and then do Revise. So when I select Revise here, it'll open up the Revise panel, and then I'll use my revision rule that I've been assigned, so this will vary based on company. And then I can give it a new name if I want the next revision to have a different name. So remember, you can tell the revisions apart with the revision ID. So it's up to you on renaming it. And then you can add some type of description. So this is new revision. And then I could come down to advanced copy options if I have this, and I can see that it's going to copy the specification document and all of these attachments down for me. So if you scroll to the right a little bit, you can see that it's going to copy those down as a reference. So if I hit revise, it's going to open the new revision based on the checkbox I had at the bottom. And then I can see I can change things about it real quick, but it's pulled down the associated data as well. So if I go up across the top, I can see content on this object is still here. Attachments, oh, I didn't let it load, there you go. And then in here I can see all the attachments are brought. I can see they're still referenced as files, and I see they still have their flags. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say that I need these same files attached, but I need to get the parent object resubmitted. So I've created the new revision at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and submit it into the workflow. Now, if you wanted to replicate the real world scenario, you could go get a file off of your system. So maybe I have this other file here, and that's the one that I had forgot to add. And you'll notice that it's not highlighting. I need to switch this over to table or tree to get that table view, and then I can drag and drop it and it'll turn blue. So at that point, I've added my new data. Okay, but let's say I open the data and I interact with it a little bit and I leave it checked out. So I'm going to come in here and choose Edit, Checkout. So first of all, when it's checked out, there is sometimes a column in here that will show you. If I do an arrange and just do a search for checked, I can say let's add checked out to the list of columns and hit save and arrange. And you can see that it's checked out, and I can see by who if I hover over it. So some workflows don't allow you to submit if one of the child objects is checked out, so it's always a good idea to come back up and choose Edit and choose Check In if you have the permissions, or let somebody know. We're going to see what happens when we submit this way, and then we'll check it in. So in this case, I like what I'm seeing, and I'm going to come up to the top, choose Manage, Submit to Workflow. I'm going to go to All, and the workflow that I'm using in here is called the ABC workflow. Now note, if you are following along, this is not a workflow that you're going to have out of the box. It's just an example, a scenario to show you what is possible. So you can recreate it for those of you moving on to administrative routes if you would like. But in here we've got the ABC workflow for the assembly. It's going to pull in the new bolt assembly. And then if I come into references, notice nothing is in the references section. So I'm going to choose Submit, but I could go to Assignments first and pre-assign all of the different tasks. So if you don't want to get that task back in between each submission, I highly recommend coming here like we did in the previous video. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I have some room to work. And then I'm going to come in here, and on Initiate Workflow, this is kind of the first task of this workflow. So typically the design intent on Initiate Workflow is it comes back to the submitting user so they can do their thing. So I'm going to leave this alone. Maybe I want to get it into the workflow, have it assigned to me, and then review it to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then pass it forward for review. So in the reviews category, you'll notice when I select that, down at the bottom, there is a required selection. So I'm going to select that, and in this case, the review is going to have to be done by the engineering, or let's do one of the other groups. So let's do engineering, just the group as a whole. So I'm going to click Assign, and I've assigned it to the reviewer, and you can see that's up there. So I could add more people, but in this case, I'm just going to go to the engineering review. And the engineering review is going to be the engineering group as well, so as a secondary review, and hopefully it'll be somebody different. But we're also going to come down and pick somebody else. The most high-level person we have is a DBA. So I'm going to add the DBA as the reviewer. And again, I'm picking resource pools because I don't want to individually assign anything. I want to give it to a group and let them dictate based on availability. So in here, I've got everything selected. So I could scroll down. You can see that there is another task over here. So there's a rework task that gets assigned at some point if you fail the workflow. Now, depending on the reason for the failure, you may have that rework task going to any number of people. So in this case, I'm going to leave it unselected so that the workflow comes back to me when it gets to that state. I'm going to go ahead and choose Submit. And then you'll notice it's checked out. So this is what an error looks like when it comes into the workflow. So it says that there's an object, it tells you what that object is, it's checked out, and it can't be attached. So this may occur on your workflows, or you may get other errors. Definitely pay attention to those. And then what I can do here is I know it's this object right here in the background, and I can collapse this just a hair. And what's cool is if I select it and I say ... edit, check in, or cancel checkout. So I'll check it in though to record what has happened to it. So now notice I was able to keep the dialog open, and I can hit Submit again. Now it's going to check, and it's not going to throw the error, and I don't have to go redo all the work that I had. It makes it really easy to work, and you can see that it has been submitted into the workflow. So if I come up to the top area up here, you can see the workflow as a whole as well as my tasks. So the biggest key to this is it's at the Initiate Workflow task now. That is the task that just allows me to double check my attachments. Then it's going to go into the review. And each one of these tasks are also going to check for the checked out states. So in this case, I'm going to say everything looks great. Excel attached. Okay, so I've got the attachments there. I could go look at them. If I do that, make sure you save your comment. I'm gonna go into attachments, and I've got all my files, including the new one that doesn't have the release status on it. So I'm gonna say that's good, and I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the workflow tab. And then in the workflow tab, I'm gonna go ahead and paste my comment and hit complete. So this came back to me in that case. I'm gonna choose complete. And then now you can see that the task went off. It is now currently at the no decision for the review sign off, and it's in the engineering resource pool. So you can see if I expand the task down below, it's at that task. Now, one thing that is new to us is this dotted line. So this basically means that if the review is rejected instead of approved, we saw in the previous example, it just kind of sat there until we undid our decision. Now it will actually go down a different route and double back once the rework step is completed. So in here, I need to go into my inbox because it's went to a resource pool. I'm going to go into my team inbox up here, select the task, and you can see the information about it. But remember, we don't want to perform the task here in the team inbox. Even though we could, there may be different permissions. So we're going to go ahead and come up to the top and choose Manage, and we're going to claim the workflow task. So now that'll move it over to my inbox, and no other individuals in that team inbox will be trying to achieve the same task. I'm going to select it from my location, and now I can review everything I need to review. So at this point, I'm going to say reviewed. Notice I have the ability to add in this case. I wouldn't always, so if something was missing, I could just add it here, but that's completely dependent upon what rules are available in your environment. So I reviewed it. You forgot something. So something's missing out of the attachments, so I'm going to hit reject. So I'm going to go ahead and click it, and then you'll see that the task will go back. And now I have a new task in my inbox, and that's because I didn't assign this to anybody. So now I've got it in my inbox. So it may not be me that has to do this task because whatever was forgotten may not be my issue. I may not have created the object. So maybe I need to reassign this. I can see the comments in the workflow, and I can see why it was rejected or why it was not approved. And then I can dictate based on that who it needs to go to. So then I can come in to manage and reassign this workflow task to the individual that it needs to go to. There's a bunch of ways to do this. This is just one of them. So I'm going to say reassign, and I'm going to say this needs to go to the engineering group again. So that somebody can do it. I know I'm a part of the engineering group right now, but theoretically I could be somebody else. So I'm going to say based on feedback, send to engineering group for fix. Reassign it. And now it's going to go out to that resource pool. Somebody else is going to log in and go to their team inbox. So then they're going to see it, and they're going to be able to claim that task and interact with that task. So they can say, okay, this is great. I'm going to go, I've got plenty of time to do this, and I'm going to claim the task. And then go to their task and go ahead and fix whatever was wrong with that component. So whenever they correct it, then the workflow cycles through. They complete the task, and you can see information about what was all occurring during that workflow cycle. If you go back to the workflow, you can see that it's completely doubled around the rework step. and then it's made it all the way back to the initiate workflow step. Now in this area right here, notice that it had done the initiate workflow, but now it's not showing you the original run. It's saying it started, but you can see that comments are keeping from the original run. But you can't see that this had finished previously. Now, if I come out of this, the next step is the review, and you can see that it did reject it. So when it gets back to it, we'll be able to see if it updates that table. If I go to the review sign off, this is the 2 subtasks inside of the review, and you can see the review sign off task, which if I expand this, was the task that actually got rejected, and I can see it failed. The select team is the first part of that, where I had picked who was going to perform the task. So don't get a false sense of security with the green. If the rest of it is red, the entire thing failed. So at this point, it's going back through the workflow, and I'm going to go ahead and fast track this all the way through all the reviews. So I'm just going to say complete. And just to prove a point, just note that in the team, in a moment, if it goes to the team inbox, I will show you what it looks like to approve from that inbox so that you can kind of get the impression of which one you want to do. So my tasks, I'm going to approve this one. And then it's back at the review, so the team. And then I'm going to come in here, select this, and I'm going to say this time it looks good. So even though I should claim this task, and it's probably the best practice, if you are the only person in that group that's getting that assignment, you can execute it from that location, assuming you have the permissions to. So at this point, it should be pretty much going through. I'm going to go to my tracking, and then if I go to perform sign-offs, you can see this time it looks good is on this task. And then I can see all of that other execution. So the engineering review, the sign off for this individual, and then notice that the DBA has the sign off at this point as well. So the DBA is what it's waiting on, and it has looped through and shown me all the extra tasks, but it did update on the other ones. So in here, you keep the comments, but you do get the completes and approves the second time around. So in here, we also want to take note of, if we look at the attachments, this is still in the workflow process, and there is an indicator that shows up on these objects that indicates that it is in a process. So you can see that icon at the top of the page here, says it's in a process. It looks like a little workflow. If I go to a search, or actually I can go to my Explorer because this object exists there, and then I see it in here. If I scroll a little bit to the right or make my page a little bit bigger, just scroll to the right, you can see that that little icon shows up in the table as well for that object. So that means it's in a process. So I can come in here and then we'll go ahead and fast track it as a DBA. We'll have them finish the workflow and we'll be done with that. Now for you as the user, that's pretty much it for here. The workflow will move off onto the next task, and you will continue to perform tasks out of the inbox or whatever you need to do day to day. We appreciate your time today inside of the course, learning a little bit about a more advanced workflow, some things that you would encounter like claiming tasks, rejection paths, as well as some additional tips for being able to identify if it is in a process. In the next video, we're going to get even further into things like surrogate users, and then kind of finish us off for this whole overview of workflows. So appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next demonstration.